Hi guys, and welcome to the very first full-length Brighton Jazz School podcast. We've got a great show coming up for you. Album of the week this week is the Miles Davis recording, Four and More, recorded in 1964. Fascinating album. I go into quite some depth about the details and the mechanics of it. Really, really interesting. Stick around for that. We've also got the guest interview this week is with guitarist Paul Richards. Lovely guy, great guitarist, really, really interesting interview. Paul also set up the Brunswick Jam, so don't miss out on hearing how he set it up and why he set it up. So it's really fascinating. We've also got a student information section. Now, I really don't like the name of that, so if you can think of a better way to describe that section of this podcast, please write in and let me know. It's basically where I'm going to be delivering reiterated information from both the Learn to Play and the Learn to Listen sessions. You know, sort of building on what I've already said in those classes, and it's also a chance for people who are not in the classes to know what we get up to and to ask any questions as well. So if you can think of a better title for that, I'd be most grateful. Please write in. So let's kick off the show with the album of the week, and this week it's the Miles Davis recording, Four and More. The band features what's now become known as the second great quintet, featuring George Coleman on tenor sax, Herbie Hancock on piano, Ron Carter on bass, and a very young Tony Williams on drums, and obviously Miles Davis on the trumpet. The band displays fire, intensity, beauty, soul, and a level of interplay that is rarely, rarely seen. Up-tempo tracks include So What?, Walking, two tracks composed by English composer Victor Feldman, Joshua, and Seven Steps to Heaven. There's also the composition written by Miles called Four. Also on the album are some slower tracks, mostly standards, All of You, All Blues, My Funny Valentine, I Thought About You, and There Is No Greater Love. Now these slower tracks really display a very sophisticated take on how to play ballads. Very, very beautiful, very emotional, and again this sense of interplay. I did a study on the track I Thought About You for a university project, and I transcribed all of the parts, so the drums, the bass, the sax, the piano, and obviously Miles, and it really looks like a pre-composed score. You know, it's absolutely perfect. The gaps, the spaces, the just the interplay, it all locks in. It looks like it's pre-written, like a Stravinsky score or something. It's absolutely perfect, quite incredible. I've listened to that track so many times, and every time I listen to it I hear something different. So really try to listen really deeply, especially on that one track. I mean, the whole album is fantastic, but that one track is really worth a special listen. The whole concert was put on to raise money for voters' registration drives in connection with the civil rights movement. And actually, Miles had told the organisers that he would do the concert for free. But what he didn't do was tell the musicians. So interestingly, right before the band went on, he told them that they weren't getting paid to do the gig, which, needless to say, they were slightly upset. And in Miles's autobiography, I won't repeat what he says because it's perhaps not before the watershed, but you know, they had a huge argument right before they were due to go on stage, and possibly that had something that had an impact on the music. Well, I'm sure it had an impact on the music, but maybe that gave it the fire, because they literally went on very, very enraged that Miles hadn't even told them that they weren't getting paid for the gig. The interplay on this album, especially between the rhythm section, is simply magical. You know, Miles was really, really great at choosing fantastic rhythm sections, and certainly he did not go wrong with these three guys. Miles was incredible at choosing rhythm sections that really listened and responded. The second great quintet, featuring Herbie Hancock on piano, Ron Carter on bass, and again Tony Williams on drums, created some very magical textures, and Miles absolutely loved playing behind this rhythm section, especially Tony Williams, because he really was playing some very interesting things that really no drummer had done before. Very intricate, very hard driving, edgy, really things that nobody had done before. And Miles loved musicians who could stand on their own and offer something new to the music. And equally, Herbie Hancock had the ability to sort of summarize really what Miles and both George Coleman and Wayne Shorter later on, what they did in their solo. Herbie Hancock was able to summarize it in his own piano solo and just kind of put the icing on the cake. He really was a fantastic, or still is, a really fantastic pianist. His comping, his soloing, just absolutely the best in the world. So really check out this album. It's quite difficult to get hold of. The Columbia version, the box set, it's two CDs, it is available. It is hard to get, but you can buy, I think they're called, one of the concerts is called My Funny Valentine, which you can buy separately, which is all the ballads, and then the other one, I think, is called Stella by Starlight, or Miles Davis Plays Stella by Starlight, which is the more up-tempo tracks. But I highly recommend getting the whole concert on recording if you can, because you really listen to it from start to finish, so in the order that the songs happen, because then you get a sense of the overall development, how things develop through the concert, and also you hear the audience's reaction to it, because I mean they from the moment those guys stepped out on stage, the audience knew that they were in for a very, very special night of music, and they certainly didn't disappoint. So check it out on iTunes. You can download it. You can get it from Amazon as well. But again, try and get the main bulk of the concert and listen to it in its entirety. Okay, so that's it for this week. Please have a listen to this album. Feel free to leave your comments on the Brighton Jazz School forum. Log in, leave me your views. I'd love to hear what you think about this album, and I always reply to questions. So feel free to write to me there. And catch us again next week for another great album of the week. Hi guys, and welcome to the artist interview section of the Brighton Jazz School podcast. Today we've got guitarist extraordinaire, Paul Richards. I'm going to talk to Paul a little bit about his musical background, and also Paul set up the Brighton, or the Brunswick jam session, I think, 2 years ago was it?
Nearly 2 years
Nearly 2 years ago. So we're going to, have a bit of a chat about that. And he really is a fantastic guitarist. He's at the Brunswick every Tuesday. If you haven't seen him play, then come down. He's all over town, really, not just the Brunswick. So make sure you come and check out his gigs. And here we go. So welcome, Paul. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Wayne.
I've got a few questions just to start with about your musical background. How did you first get into the guitar? What made you choose the guitar?
I just loved guitar, really. I liked, Jimi Hendrix and everything and all that. And then I also liked listening to classical, like John Williams and everyone.
Right.
So I started, doing a mixture, really, of rock and classical. Then left the classical totally and just carried on with rock.
Cool.
In the beginning.
Okay. I guess that's quite common for a lot of guitarists who get into jazz through rock. Is that how you were exposed to jazz, or did you have a secret, kind of dirty secret jazz lover from an early age? I mean, how did you get into jazz?
It wasn't from an early age, really. It was I always liked improvised music with improvisation, and I just fell into it from that, really, and listening to some old recordings.
Great. And who in particular would you say turned you on to jazz? Who did you, is there a particular guitarist that you heard and that was it for you, or did it?
To be honest, at the very, very beginning, I used to love, Paco de Lucia. So, flamenco, that was what I loved originally. And I just, through that, really, I think heard lots of improvisation and then Brazilian music. So it was just guitarists that weren't really in the jazz thing, and then when I got more into jazz, I started listening to all the usual, like Joe Pass and everything.
Joe Pass,
Pat Metheny, Pat Martino, things like that.
Great. And did you kind of study the earlier styles of jazz guitar? I mean, do you? It sounds like when you play, that you have a knowledge, very assured knowledge of the role of the guitar in jazz and how it's developed. I mean, would you say that's the case?
Yeah, well, listen to a lot of Joe Pass because basically what I like a lot is the the chord melody stuff. When you're not in a band,
sort of block chords.
You're on your own. So that's what I was listening to a lot mainly. So a lot of Joe Pass, and then band wise, I'd listen, to obviously Wes Montgomery and everyone. Yeah. But even great Mike Stern, Mike Stern and Kurt Rosenwinkel, folk like that, really.
No, they're great players. And do you see any similarities between jazz and flamenco? Obviously there's improvisation, but perhaps you can maybe talk a little bit about I don't know if you feel music or improvisation is another form of communication. I know many jazz players do. Is that something that you latch onto as well, or?
Yeah, I do really. I just think that flamenco-wise, there's a lot of falsettas in the play and pre-arranged ideas, and I think a lot of people chuck them in as and when. And I just basically like a lot of music with, improvisation. Yeah. And music you can work at, flamenco, it's a long old slog to get, to where you want to go. So is jazz. Yeah. I think for, folk that like getting their teeth stuck into something and want to improve and work at a craft, those two sorts, along with classical and things. Well, what I enjoy anyway, I love rock and everything as well, So.
Yeah, I think as a jazz musician you have to be open to everything. I mean, that's the nature of the music. That's why we have jazz, isn't it? It's just an amalgamation of so many different styles that, you can't ignore, say, the blues without, checking out some of the earlier jazz styles as well. So, yeah. And okay, so the Brunswick, I mean, has really, really taken off in the last 2 years. I mean, it's certainly become one of the more well-known jam sessions in Brighton. I mean, what gave you the idea to start a jam there?
Well, I think the idea is I used to play here years ago there was this great musician that lived here years ago. He was a pillar of the community, really. His name was Pete Lorenz, and he used to have a house on Lewis Road. And he used to have loads of musicians around his house to have parties and jams. Anyway, he started this band called Pete Lorenz and Friends with a load of people. There was about 6 of us or so. And then we started playing in the Brunswick. So I, met Phil, the owner, and that through that. And, we used to think they put on brilliant gigs here all the time. And then I just thought one time, I'd love to do a jam here. I envisioned it, everyone coming down and joining in, and it's a really nice venue, so
it is.
So I asked Phil, and he said yes, and then we did it.
Fantastic. It's interesting you say the whole vision of it. I mean, there's so many jams that sort of come and go, but this one in particular, I think, is very welcoming to younger musicians, student musicians. Obviously, with Brighton Jazz School, I mean, they, as daunting as it is, they still feel very welcome. To come and sit in, and I think that's got a lot to do with your sort of attitude towards the music. And from what I sort of hear, obviously, from I know you a bit through playing. I mean, it's very much the attitude of we're all students at the end of the day. No matter what level you're at, we're still here to learn, which is really great and really encouraging and really good for the scene as well. So I think on behalf of many student jazz musicians, including myself, I think we're very, very grateful that you did set up the Brunswick Jam, and I hope I'm sure it will continue to blossom. What about current projects? So do you? I mean, you're obviously featured all over town with different people in different settings, but do you have any projects of your own that you are working on at the moment?
Paul Richards' solo guitar project. I just turn up somewhere and play for 3 hours, on my own, playing, jazz, choro, Brazilian style of music, sambas, bit of classical.
Fantastic.
So they're like classical pieces, but then I work out, the harmony and improvise over them like you would, a standard.
Yeah.
So that way, and just various, jazz people, but play with, Paul Aguilera in a duo, and we try and play a lot of Argentinian music,
right?
Like chacareras and stuff like that, and that's enjoyable because you've got the improvisation and the nice harmonies. And then you're strumming along on a nylon strum guitar, which I enjoy. Yeah, and I've got a trio with Sam Glasson and Nick McGuigan, and we play mainly samba music and choro, Brazilian choros and Venezuelan waltzes, nylon guitar, drums and double bass.
Very nice.
Influenced by, music like Bard and Powell and Yamandu Costa and Rafael Rebello and people like that.
Fantastic. That sounds great. So where can we hear you play? Where can folks find out where you're playing?
Various places. Well, I've got a website, paulrichardsguitar.com.
Okay.
I put it on there, but also starting a new quartet night. Doug has opened a bar underneath the Greenhouse Effect on Church Road in Hove, and he's calling it Brighton Blue Note.
Great.
And it's going to be every Friday, 11 till 1. The bar's open till 4, and I'm going to get a different quartet every week.
Fantastic.
It kicks off on the 10th of February.
10th of February.
Friday the 10th of February. Opens before 11, but jazz starting at 11.
Great.
And then who's playing with us? It's Simon D'Souza on sax.
Oh yeah.
Terry Pack on bass, and me on guitar.
Fantastic. That sounds great. That's a great venue as well. I used to play there years and years and years ago. Very, very good, conductive for a jazz environment. Well, that's great. Paul, just give us your website address once more so that folks can stay in touch to where you're playing.
It's paulrichardsguitar.com.
There you go. Great. Thanks a lot. Okay, so it's time for the Jazz Artists Tip of the Week. So, Paul, obviously Brighton there's loads and loads of jazz students in Brighton, and hopefully people are listening from outside of Brighton as well. Can you give us any quick tip that will, transform us into masterful jazz players?
Well, you'd say an improvisation tip. I'd just say don't worry about it really. All the stuff you're practicing at home, all these concepts and stuff like that, don't get on the Brunswick or somewhere and try and force it out because you're thinking, I got to squeeze that in. Just let it flow out of you. It'll come in one day and that. Because the more you think too much, it's good to think, but that's what I say.
Absolutely.
Because I've done it before. I've got to do this, and
it always sounds a bit contrived, doesn't it? Yeah. I think that's a great tip, and like you said, jazz is such an involved thing that it's quite easy to get caught up in the theory of things and to forget that we just want to play and have fun, and it's quite easy to get caught up in the whole working out the harmony, and obviously we need to do that, but when you're improvising, as you said, just enjoy the time that you've got there.
And just join in, don't when you're down here, say tonight we're doing one and a jam, if you're a beginning student, don't think I can't get up. Just do it, because you don't want to be annoyed. They'll be pleased you've got up, and joined in. It's all about having fun, isn't it, and learning. So
absolutely. There you go, folks, you heard it here. So don't be afraid of getting up and asking. Come and talk to Paul, who's very approachable, and it is the best way to learn. So can't encourage you enough. You've heard it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Come and sit in. Okay, Paul, thanks very much for joining us.
Wayne.
And it's always a pleasure to hear you and play with you, and I look forward to maybe playing a few tracks tonight.
Yeah.
Cheers, Paul,
Cheers,
and we'll
Wayne.
see you again soon.
Thanks.
Cheers. Okay, now this section is really for students, but it's also for prospective students who want to get an idea about what we do. So mostly it's going to be just reiterating what we've done in both the Learn to Play class and the Learn to Listen class. So I'm not entirely sure what to call this section, so if you have any ideas, something snappy, something quite funny, rather than, say, student information section or student reminders, try, I don't know, I can't think of anything, but feel free to email in. That will be a great help. Okay, so in last week's Learn to Play, we were concentrating on melodic development and creative flow. Now, you may have remembered that I asked some various questions at the beginning, which I'm sure all jazz musicians have asked at some point. Things like, what should I play in my solo? How do I keep coming up with new ideas? How long should I stay on one idea? How do I develop it? What makes a solo compelling to the listener? It was a fascinating topic to approach. And I started off by suggesting an exercise where you choose, 8 bars of a standard, and instead of just launching in with a solo, all guns blazing, try and pare it right down. Start with one note per chord. Try and make those notes the melodic framework for what you're going to develop. Now, this is purely an exercise, so rather than this is not something you would use while you're improvising. There's not enough time to think about this stuff. So just try and pare it down, one note per chord. Go for nice sounding notes, further up in the chord, the 9s, the 11s, the 13ths. Then you can go on and add 2 notes to the chord. Just develop that a bit further. Maybe use a passing note going to the next chord. Maybe use another note that has the same common note in the next chord along. And develop this idea. And then go on to 3 notes per chord. Start to use bigger intervals, bigger leaps between notes. Really explore that. And then after that, you should have a fairly solid idea about what the melody is doing. You want to always try and relate back to those original notes that you chose right at the beginning. Step 4 is going on to then quaver-based ideas, so 8th notes. Try and string together those key elements, those key important notes, the most profound notes that you've chosen. String them together. Then, do it mechanically to start with if you want. Do it just by theory. Use passing notes, use guide tones. Just make it as coherent as you possibly can. And then the final step then is to then pare everything down again. Go through that line, make sure there's no notes in there that just don't do the line any favours. Do this completely analytically, and obviously based on sound. That's the most important thing. If it sounds good, then it is good. If it sounds waffly, then cut some of it out. Less is more. And treat this as purely as an exercise. Try this over a couple of different standards. It's too much to cram in. It's too much to think about when you're actually improvising. So don't make the mistake of trying to do this in real time while you're improvising. This is purely an exercise to get you in the frame of mind to be able to develop your solo. And finally, we spoke about how to shape a solo. What form should your solo take? Start very simply. If you listen to any interview with the jazz greats, they always talk about, telling a story with your solo. So use that as a structure. Your solo is going to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So in other words, it builds up to a climax in the middle, and then it fades away again. And of course, that's not the only way you can do it, but it's a good way of starting. You can. Another effective way is building up to a climax, but never quite reaching the climax, never quite getting there. And letting the listener kind of want to have more. That's another great way of creating structure within your solo. So read through the handouts. The handouts are available to non-students on the website for a very small fee. But feel free to kind of join in. You can get a lot from these podcasts. Hopefully you'll learn a lot. You'll get an idea about what we do in the Learn to Play class as well. In the Learn to Listen class, we took a look at bebop, and in particular Dizzy Gillespie. We were talking about him as a jazz ambassador, a really great communicator, fun person, very funny, very witty, as well as a supreme musician, one of the greats, just an absolutely stunning trumpet player, a real visionary, a real just one of the greats of our time. And he brought so much to bebop. He was responsible in part for bringing Cuban jazz into bebop. Check out his versions of Manteca, A Night in Tunisia. These tunes are really, really great. We then moved on to the very tragic figure of Bud Powell. Now, for me, he holds a very special place in my heart as a musician. I've learnt many of his standards, his compositions, I should say, and his music never fails to touch me and get me, just really in the essence of what bebop is about. He did much more than just take Charlie Parker's solos and put them on the piano. He was much more than that. He had his own language that was very, very linked to what Charlie Parker was doing, but he's very, very subtle in what he does. The phrasing, the grace notes, all the small intricate details that he put in is vital to his music. And I would say if you're ever learning any Bud Powell compositions, try and make sure you have all those details in, because they really make the composition come alive. That was, for me, that's what Bud Powell is about detail and recreating, what he wanted. He's a very, very special brain, very special mind, an absolute genius. And he really warrants kind of playing that music in the same way. I mean, I don't mean the improvising, but certainly the melodies, the way he plays them are very, very special. And I don't think you should really lose sight of that. So listen a lot to Bud Powell. The Amazing Bud Powell, Volume 1 to 5, they're all great, different periods of his life. So many great albums that he did. Check out the website, there'll be recommendations on there, some of his great albums and great compositions. We then went on to talk about the eccentric genius Thelonious Monk. Absolutely fascinating person again. In my view, one of the most prolific jazz composers, up there with Ellington. I mean, I forget the exact number that he's written, but, I'm always discovering a new composition, and hearing a new one played, and I just love the way he writes music. He's very, very funny, very, very original, quirky, yes, but his music is just so supremely written. It sounds so simple, but when you try and play it, and it's like, wow, it's difficult. It's I can spend a lot of time on one composition trying to learn it. In fact, I did that for many of his compositions, trying to get the rhythmic aspect of them right. They're very quirky. They're not what you think. Check out his solo piano recording live in San Francisco. That's one of my favorite all-time albums. He's written so many great songs. Twinkle Twinkle, Round Midnight. There's just so many great songs. I really urge you to check him out. So please listen to all of those three players and, study, because these three guys, along with Charlie Parker, they're responsible for a big part of what modern jazz is now. You cannot ignore these people. Even if you're not a fan of bebop, you just, it's like a roast dinner. Here we go, another famous analogy. It's like a roast dinner with no gravy. It's an essential part. You can have the meat, you can have the vegetables, but without that gravy kind of mixing it all together, it's kind of boring. So check out bebop. Check out Bud Powell, Thelonious Monk, Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Max Roach. That's the session next week is on Max Roach and Charlie Mingus. Great composer. Check these people out. Spotify. You have no excuses. It's all there for free. You can stream it onto your computers. So visit brightonjazzschool.com for recommendations and do yourself a favor. Check these people out. Welcome to Track of the Week. Now, in this section of the podcast, every week I'm going to be presenting one track featured at the Brunswick Jam on a Tuesday. So obviously, for it to get played on this podcast, the particular track has to be, it has to really stand out from what else went on at the Jam in that particular week. So, fortunately, that's going to be quite easy to do because lots of great music happens on a Tuesday. You never know who's going to sit in, and it's always a surprise. And anyone who goes there will know exactly what I'm talking about. So, in this particular week, we're going to feature Paul Richards, who just gave that great interview for us, and he's also responsible for setting up the jam nearly 2 years ago. So on behalf of me and certainly the Brighton Jazz School students, and I'm sure many musicians around Brighton, thank you for setting it up, because it's just such a great place to come and play, come and hang out, and catch up with musicians that we play with, on a regular basis, but don't necessarily hang out all the time. So it's a really pleasant atmosphere, and very encouraging to students who want to get up and play. So thanks, Paul. And I'd like to say a quick thank you to Mike Guest, who has been, in one way or another, instrumental in the setting up of Brighton Jazz School, and also he's the producer and editor of this podcast. So thank you for your enthusiasm, thank you for your dedication to this, and it's great to just have you around, and we're looking very much forward to hearing about your magnificent jazz cruise that you're going on in I think in like a week or so. I've read the list: Benny Golson, the Heath Brothers, Kurt Elling. You're in for a treat. We're highly jealous here, but I'm going to interview you, actually, Mike. That would be a great thing to do, and I'm sure the listeners would love to hear about your trip. Trip of a lifetime, But okay, so I'm going to leave you with the track now. Thanks for tuning in. Please subscribe to this podcast. It's going to be a weekly thing, and we're very excited by it. Please just subscribe and keep listening. It's going to be a very exciting and useful thing for you to be checking out each week. Also sign up to the Brighton Jazz School website. If you register there, you'll get the chance to post comments and questions on the forum, which then will feed back to me so that I can create a better podcast for you in the future. So any feedback, any questions you might have, that's the place to go. BrightonJazzSchool.com. I'll leave you now in the capable hands of Paul Richards. This is Live at the Brunswick, every Tuesday from 8:30 till 11 p.m. Hope to see you there. This is Wayne McConnell, Brighton Jazz School, signing off.